All right, we'll give folks another minute or two, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. If folks can begin to settle into your seats. Feel free to grab coffee and any other treats as we begin this event today. All right, so good morning, beautiful people. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. Nice to see so many new faces. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Nefertiti Walker. I'm the Vice Chancellor here at UMass Amherst for the Office of Equity and Inclusion. I also serve as the Deputy Vice President for Academic Affairs, Student Affairs, and Equity for our system office. I'm very happy to be here today, so I am duly excited in both roles to be here serving as your host for this event. I want to begin with centering the focus on the lands with which we are currently hosting this event. The University of Massachusetts Amherst acknowledges that it was founded and built on the unceded homelands of the Pocumtuck Nation on the land of the Narawtug community. We begin with gratitude for nearby waters and lands. We recognize these lands and waters as important relations with which we are all interconnected and depend on to sustain life and well-being. The Pocumtuck had connections with these lands for millennia. Over 400 years of colonization, when Pocumtuck peoples were displaced, many joined their Algonquian native relatives to the east, south, west, and north. That includes Mashpee and the Keweenaw, Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Narragansett, Mohegan, Pequot, Mohican communities, and the Abenaki and other nations of the Wabanaki Confederacy. These natives people still maintain connections and relationships of care for these lands today. We also acknowledge that the University of Massachusetts Amherst is a land-grant university. As part of the Morrill Land Grant Act, portions of land from 82 native nations west of the Mississippi were sold to provide the resources to found and build this university. As an active first step towards decolonization, we encourage you to learn more about the native nations whose homelands UMass Amherst now resides on and the indigenous homelands on which you live and work. We also invite you to deepen your relationship to these living lands and waters. So thank you again for everyone for being in attendance today. I mean, it's raining outside, it's a little dreary, and everyone showed up in big numbers, so we really appreciate you being here and appreciate your attention. I'm thrilled to see so many familiar faces. I'm also very thrilled to see new faces as well. And I welcome those joining us via live stream. Before we move on, I want to shout out Elena McCauley, Senior Director for Engagement and Inclusion for our office, who typically would be the MC for this event, but is out on maternity leave. I'm confident that she is watching the live stream and will give me a play-by-play of my performance, for better or worse. This event seeks to bring the campus together in community. Building on our knowledge and understanding of each other and inclusive environment, we are desperately seeking to co-create the community, the inclusive community that we all want. So thank you for being a part of our journey towards this inclusive excellence that we seek. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Betsy Crocco. Betsy will be presenting Designing Environments for Belonging and Well-Being. As the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Campus Life and Wellbeing, Dr. Crocco provides strategic vision for campus wellbeing, leading the collaborative that includes residential life, campus recreation, and wellbeing. She has a 30-year career in collegiate mental health, formerly serving as Director of the Counseling and Mental Health Services at UConn, and in therapist roles at the University of Wisconsin, Holy Cross, and Connecticut College. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Crocco to the stage.
Well, I am excited to be here, and thank you so much for the introduction. I'll spend some time up here, then I'll come and wander around, and hopefully all the technology will work. You know, this thing up here where you see your slides is called a confidence monitor, and we didn't have one, so we got one. I'm using my laptop. If I had known that there was such a thing called a confidence monitor, I would have gotten it in adolescence and had it with me always. So the most important person and people in the room right now is you, because we're talking about co-creation. So step number one, I'm going to ask you to, so this will be a slightly interactive presentation, if you're able to get up and introduce yourself to everyone at your table. Now, if you are like a human being, you probably sat with all the people that you already know, and so this is an opportunity to be present with them each individually and maybe say to each person, like, good morning, how have you been? What's going on? And so we'll start there, give you 2 or 3 minutes to do that with the folks at your table, and then we'll come back to the center. Me to move it forward? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. This is the one, yes. Not the next one yet. And if I go like this and it's not working, then you just, yeah, okay. Okay, always good. So we'll come back to center. It's always hard to, and a good sign that our community likes to chat. I'll throw out a term just casually here, community of practice. Some of you, raise your hand if you are on the JED committee for mental health promotion. suicide prevention, proud members of the JED committee. We always start with a turn and talk. We always have snacks, and we call ourselves a community of practice, and really exposing ourselves to some similar ideas, and then branching outwards, right? The power is in how are these ideas being applied in all of the different areas versus one particular staff or one particular person trying to run around and do, right? We have the power here. We have the power here to shift culture and create a community that's centered in connection and belonging. And so that's really the goal today, is to talk about that, to be a little inspired by that, and maybe even come up with some specific ideas. So we'll start with the most essential element that we can think of, that I can think of. Those of you in chemistry probably think of more elemental things, but that is the breath, right? And according to James Nestor, so there'll be a little book club suggestions going on throughout the talk here. This book called Breathe or Breath. Evidently, we're all breathing too fast. I definitely am at this current moment, yes, breathing too fast. So we're going to try inhaling for 6 counts and exhaling for 6 counts. So are we ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I didn't do any of that with you, but I hope it was calming for you. And that idea, right, that we are calmed by the breath, but also that the body is our signal keeper around our emotions. And part of that starts with this element of the breath, is a centerpiece of where we're going to go today to talk about the embodied experience of belonging or lack thereof, importantly. And the importance that these kinds of bodily experiences are impacted by the context. Yeah. When the people in the back see me madly trying to click, feel free to advance the slide, right? The breath sits in the political context. And that's part of what we're going to focus on today. Next slide, please. So no need to bury the lead here. I'm going to give you the take-home messages, and you can feel free to check your email for the rest of the presentation. I'd also like to give a shout-out to those of you who helped me paint rocks with students during Frosh Fest. Jeff Hescock spent 3 hours with me doing those kinds of SACL activities. Not only can he prevent, well, you can't really prevent the pandemic, but respond to it. So the idea is that we move away from an individual pathology framework made famous here in the US by the medical model, but other ways of thinking and being, and that the design of our environment has cultivated an epidemic of loneliness, a mental health epidemic, violence, racial crisis. It is manufactured and engineered. And the slightly positive news there is, can we engineer in the other direction? Right, towards connection, belonging, and most importantly, love. And that's where I think, as a university, we have power and obligation and hope. That each one of you can look at your tasks here at the university, the work that you're charged to do, the work that you bring your heart to, and say, is there a way to make this more connected, more interactive, more inclusive? And so Look around. How many people are here? If we were able to do that, we could move the needle. Next slide, please. So I'll start with an invocation. Bell Hooks, a favorite of mine and probably many of yours, has a book called Belonging, where she says, I dreamed about a culture of belonging. I still dream that dream. I contemplate what our lives would be like if we knew how to cultivate awareness, to live mindfully, peacefully. If we learned habits of being that would bring us closer together, that would help us build the beloved community, of course, referencing John Lewis there. Right. So this idea that we have awareness first as important, we tune in, like what's my breath doing? What's my body doing right now, right? Awareness, then insight, what's that about? And then a different choice, right? So as a therapist, these are the building blocks of the work that we do with people is awareness, insight, and choice, and how do we do that as individuals to move institutions? Also, I would just say that one of my best teachers, Rolf Gates, who is my yoga teacher, talks about learning as remembering. We're remembering the truth of who we are. And this idea of us being together today in seminar, where it really is the conversation that's the, bulk and the importance of what we do. I was going to say meat and potatoes, but, the veggie stew and rice of the whole thing. And that my natural inclination really is to be a facilitator, and so I hope that's what we can do for you today, or with you, more importantly. And leaving space for all of us to be learners in this lifetime, right? I certainly have learned the most when people have brought their perspectives to me and unearthed some unconscious or piece that I hadn't seen before and put light on that. And so can we remain open to those lessons that may come to us today? So that's the invocation. A little bit about sort of where I come from and positioning myself. So I use she, hers pronouns. I identify as white, cisgender, heterosexual, and occupying a ton of privilege from this position. But there's other parts of the story, and I'm going to invite you to tell some of your own stories as well. I come from Torrington, Connecticut. On my father's side, my grandparents, Noni and Nono, immigrated to the US from Italy through Ellis Island. They didn't have more than a grade school education. My grandmother lost 2 children in childbirth. I just found this out this summer at a family reunion because there was a lack of maternal, they couldn't afford to go to the hospital. The 2 oldest children didn't finish their high school education because they had to go to work to pay for feeding the family. I get nervous talking about my family, not about the academic stuff, right? So my father was lucky to be on the tail end of all the siblings and had a mentor at his school who saw his promise and was able to go to college and then a master's degree. The funny part of that is he decided to go get a master's degree so that he could teach because working construction was very cold in the winter. And then on my mother's side, this house, one generation back, my great-grandparents immigrated to the US. 2 brothers lived in this house, had the business in the back. By the time I came around, what's important here is that they were stone carvers, designers and builders, and pretty much my whole family are creatives, builders, they build things. Aunt Yali took care of the inside of the house, and she just as much designed that space for connection as much as the designers of homes that my grandfather, that my father, and now my brother are. They set up design for connection. You came inside for lunch, everybody that worked for the company, because the office was right behind you. You came inside for lunch, you had lunch together, you had dinner together, 2 brothers, 2 families, and once the family got too big for the house, they just started buying the houses around. And so when my grandmother got married and moved to the other side of town, they just did not know what to make of that. So can you imagine when I went to college in Wisconsin? And then the work we're doing here, right, within campus life and well-being, and even in SACL, we're talking a lot recently about promoting flourishing in the context of connection, in the context of community. How do we build and design those spaces, those places, and those opportunities for students? Next slide, please. So Maya Angelou famously said, when we interact with people, we're all asking them a central question: do you see me? Do you see me? Is it important that I'm here? And then, I guess I was on a bell hooks kick because she's a favorite. As a classroom community, and many of us here in the educational system are connected to the classroom, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, in hearing one another's voices, in recognizing one another's presence. So let's make that real for ourselves. One of the courses that we have developed over the last 3 years within the collaborative, it was originally called Changing Minds, Changing Lives, Jenny Chandler's class. Raise your hand if you teach this class, if you have taught this class, if you're involved with this class. Shout out to Michelle Youngblood. Yay, CMAS offers this class as well. And the first activity of this class, so we start every class with a centering practice like we did here. And then we talk a little bit about the science of connection or resilience, offer them a bit of research, and then we have them do some writing, reflection, and sharing. And so I'm going to invite you to do with each other here today the writing, reflection, and sharing piece that we do in the first class, right? So I'm going to read you this poem, Where I'm From, by George Ella Lyon. Anybody hear this poem before, Where I'm From? It's a pretty classic exercise, but it's great every time. I'm from clothespins from Clorox and carbon tetrachloride. I'm from dirt under the back porch, black, glistening, it tastes like beets. I'm from the forsythia bush, the Dutch elm, whose long gone limbs I remember as if they were my own. I'm from fudge and eyeglasses, from Imogene and Alifair. I'm from the know-it-alls and pass-it-ons, from perk up and pipe down. I'm from He Restoreth My Soul, with a cotton ball lamb and 10 verses I can say myself. I'm from Artemis and Billy's Branch, fried corn and strong coffee. From the finger my grandfather lost to the auger, the eye my father shut to keep his sight. Under my bed was a dress box spilling with old pictures, a sift of lost faces. To drift beneath my dreams, I am from those moments, snapped before I budded, leaf fall from the family tree. So here's your first opportunity for something expressive and courageous. This is challenge by choice. If you choose not to do it, I won't know. It's not parochial school. And so you have a notebook that you were given as a welcome gift, and I'd encourage you to take out your notebook and hopefully a writing utensil. We are old school, we bring writing utensils. If you have just a phone, if you want to just do it, yeah. When we were facilitating a workshop for the first year students, this generation doesn't have pens, and many of us don't either, right? We'll get over that hurdle. We're going to do 4 minutes of quiet, reflective, free writing. I'm from where? I'm from Polenta and Kootiging. I'm from late night swims and fireflies. You get the picture. So we'll start a timer for 4 minutes. Maybe we can get some house music, total surprise on that request. And then I'll give you, and then I will ask you to share it with your table mates if you're able and comfortable to do that. So whatever you choose, 4 minutes, here we go. So maybe a final thought or two. Okay, we're doing pencils down in the front row. I'm out. Okay, so here's the instruction as we give it to our students. The invitation is that one person at a time, you just share exactly as it's written. And the tendency is to want to like qualify and say other things. We really encourage you to stay with what you wrote. And then people in your group, your table, can offer feedback in this format. So listen carefully to the instructions. Here is the format. Jeff Dalzell, I see your face. The format of the feedback is what stuck with you. Oh, the image of the white refrigerator in the garage stuck with me. I still remember that from teaching this class 3 years ago, right? What stuck with you, or what was strong about the writing. And there's some reasons behind doing it that way. It creates a sense of safety that I'm not here to give you advice, I'm not here to critique your story, I'm just telling you how you impacted me. That image stuck with me, or that piece stuck with me, or this is what I found strong about the writing. This is a methodology that we have tested and shows impact, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So another 5 minutes for you to go around, share your stories, and let people know what stuck with you or was strong about the writing. There you go. And we don't need house music because there'll be the chatter. Okay. Raise your hand if you have not had a chance to read your poem yet. Okay, so we'll take 2 more minutes. Okay. We have to stop talking about poetry so we can talk about statistics. No one will stop now. I wish I could run around with the mic and chat with all of you, but that's not going to work for our video audience. And hopefully the people at home took a minute to write their own poem. And these were frameable, right? So think about that. Jorge and Iris were kind enough to let me sit in on their poetry reading. And Iris, this is a t-shirt slogan I think we should do, which is, there's more to me than what you see. That was your evaluation of the exercise. And so, so humbling and true. And these are the pieces of thread that weave the fabric that create belonging. You have to take the time and you have to be together, and thank goodness we can be together. We have such a renewed appreciation for that. If anyone has tried to give one of these talks by Zoom, you really have an appreciation of that. It is very difficult. So those are some building blocks that we can use, and do we need them? So let's just take, there are a lot of statistics that we could talk about, and if you're passionately interested about the mental health statistics at this university, I welcome you to come talk to me after this, and you will be welcome to come to the JED kickoff breakfast on Friday morning, where there are also plenty of snacks. So, and awesome people. The first slide, if we can advance, we do something called the Healthy Minds Survey, about 1,500 responses, and we ask about flourishing. Remember that goal we have of promoting flourishing in the context of connection. And so flourishing is work done by Diener and Martin Seligman, sort of in the positive psychology frame. But these are the kinds of questions that are asked on the flourishing scale about, I lead a purposeful and meaningful life, my social relationships are supportive and rewarding, I'm engaged and interested in my daily activities. I actively contribute to the happiness and well-being of others. I feel competent and capable. I'm a good person, optimistic. People respect me. Right, so all good stuff that we'd want to have in our lives. Unfortunately, 69% of our respondents did not meet the cutoff for qualifying as having flourishing lives. So we can dig into this. We need to dig into this. What does this mean? But there's definitely work to do. I've heard this generation, by the way, described as Generation P. Has anyone heard that before? Right, pandemic. And then what's really important, and we could spend the next 5 hours doing this, and we will be doing this, but I'm just making some highlights. This is not an inclusive presentation to hit all of the ways that we should disaggregate our data. But we need to not just take the average. If we know anything about statistics, it doesn't reflect the realities that we need to address. And so for our students with disabilities, whether they are registered with the Disability Services Center or not registered or have no disability, it appears that there is a differentiation, a correlation, a difference, right, between flourishing and identifying as someone who has a disability. This is important for us to think about as we develop programs, as we create connection and sense of belonging on the campus. Flourishing by race. You really want to dig in and understand what this means, but certainly there's differential. We also asked questions about loneliness, et cetera, and I had a lot of statistics in this presentation, and for the sake that it's me and then lunch, I want to spend time on some other things, right? But the climate survey run by Nefertiti and staff, of course, is important data. Do you feel like you belong? Do you have a good support network? Do you have a mentor or role model? And do you feel like you can openly share your point of view? It is important to disaggregate that data and investigate. Awareness, we start here, right? This is a different awareness than just looking at an average. Insight, what's it about? And then choice, meaning what do we have to do, right? And so for our students who identify as Black, they have the least feeling of belonging. They're reporting that they don't feel like they have a good support network in terms of the highest number or percentage that feel like they don't have a support network, mentors, or can openly share their point of view. We're not going to dive into all of this. I just got this last night from our good friend Marcy in Student Affairs. And so I just want to use it as this Healthy Mind survey that we just gave in the spring of this past academic year, that we already looked at. 69% of our students were not flourishing, 47% demonstrated depression and or anxiety. In other words, met the cutoffs for the criteria of clinical depression, clinical anxiety, 47% of our students that responded to the survey. You can at least ask the question, was there some response bias? But really, does it matter? Like, it matters, but we have a problem that we know we have, right? We hear often about these issues. 51% of the students who responded said emotional and mental difficulties had hurt their academic performance. So these numbers, you'll get this slideshow. You can study them at great length, but the differences between 2019 and 2022, we started off in 2019 giving the baseline survey, and we're going to do stuff, and we're going to improve these numbers. Oops, pandemic. During the pandemic, we asked some questions of our students that, we ad hoc, we kind of made them up, right? Because we were curious and wondering, so many students feeling anxiety, what are the causes of their anxiety, and is that differential? So interestingly and importantly, think back to fall of 20, right? Goodness, what's going on in the fall of 20, right? We're getting ready for an election. January 6th hasn't happened yet. All of those things are brewing. The context and the climate has a differential impact on our students depending on how they locate in terms of their identity. So for our students who identify as Black, the racial and ethnic climate was a significant source of stress in a differential way than it was for other racial groups in this country, right? So when we talk about the mental health crisis, which gets a lot of play in the press and got a lot of play during the pandemic, there's important conversation about what are our crisis resources. You all probably received the maroon folder. It has an insert in it that has new text lines, new specific 988 information, et cetera. Please post that up wherever you can. Call Melissa personally on her cell phone. No, call CCPH, because there's a system set up for that, and we're pretty good at it. Identify and refer, right? And throw some compassion in there while you're at it. We've been talking for a long time about students in crisis. You can call Patricia's number personally, too. We all know who these people are, right? They're the bat phone. When we have a crisis, where do we refer to? But we've spent so much time down in that territory. And, think about this. You're standing by the side of the river. This is a metaphor you all know probably fairly well. People are coming down the river drowning. They're coming down faster than you can keep up with. This is a classic public health model. At some point, you have to start to move upriver, right? That's called prevention. And so there's different places in the river we can move to. So in the mid-river, these people are already in the river. This reminds me of teaching my niece to swim, right? She's already in the lake. Kick, 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 right? You've all done that before probably, or had something like it. That's where we're providing health education, wellness programs, screening and referral work that Diane's doing around AOD and drinker's checkup, et cetera, education. You'll see it on the screens, and support services. So we want a wider spread for that, not just the crisis. Great. We've offered some resilience classes. Some of you are familiar with this data, positivity and relaxation training. We were offering it over the past few years in a pilot format. It's a curriculum from Mass General Hospital, the Benson Henry Institute, sort of foremost experts in the stress response. And we're showing great results, which is wonderful, like increased emotional functioning, decreased loneliness, increased optimism, increased resilience. But I'm working on a hypothesis that, yeah, we can teach those skills. What really works about this is that it's a small class of 15 to 20 students who meet every week for 9 or 10 weeks, right? They get to hear from each other by the structure that we built. Yeah, I tried that breathing thing 4 different times this week. It doesn't work for me at all. Oh, well, I keep forgetting to do it. Oh, well, you know what I did to make that work for me is I just, like, as soon as I got up in the morning, I did it, right? That sort of peer accountability and support that none of us are perfect. We all struggle with things. They might be different things, but the struggle is real, and you're not alone if you're struggling. You're not abnormal. I know you can't tell that by looking at Instagram, but it's true, right? So I think the magic sauce there is the sustained small groups that can start to cultivate trust in this group. That's something we probably need to test out. So we love the resilience work. We love teaching people skills and having them expand their toolbox. And here's another model from Cornell that they use called the resilience pyramid. And I can't disagree with any of these things, right? Yes, I should move my body. I should fuel my body. I should sleep. But sometimes it can feel like I am alone with a pyramid of shoulds on top of me. And you know the famous saying about that, so I won't have to repeat it. Right? Don't should on me. You know that, right? It's a bumper sticker. Y'all seen it. So some of those things, right, can be different depending on the context that we create. For example, explore your spirituality. I gave you the whole family background. Yes, I was raised Roman Catholic, but lightly so. But I ended up going to a Catholic university, and where's everybody going at 10 o'clock on Sunday night or 9 o'clock on Sunday night? They're going to Mass. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see what they have to say there. Oh, there's some useful things to say, and you get to sit and be quiet and kind of meditate for a little bit. That's cool. And there are after-Mass munchies, so I'm going to that, right? It was supported by the context. Oh, and now my friends are going to Narragansett to sit on a rock and, be quiet for 5 days, and they come back with this sense of energy. I'm gonna go see what that's about, right? The institution around me supported that exploration of my spirituality that has served me, in my life. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I like sitting on a rock and looking at the ocean and being quiet. So how can we acknowledge the challenge of some of this resilience, the popularity of this resilience narrative, right? And so the metaphor we use very often, we have notebooks with a frog on the front of them, is that it's the pond, right? If all the frogs, if 47% of our students, if 90% of our students are feeling anxious, right? That's another thing to have a cutoff for clinical anxiety, but about 90% of our students feel anxious. If all the frogs in the pond are not doing well, if they're sick, you don't ask what's wrong with that frog, what's wrong with that one, and that one, and that one. You say, what's in the water? So that's a very familiar analogy, but one that's an anchor for us and I think important to think about. So how do we move upriver? Sorry, I'm not being very tuned in here. We look at the context. So next slide, please. I'll give a shout out here to the Cojourn program, and in particular, Cojourn for Racial Justice. Has anyone done the Cojourn program? Raise your hand. Well, we're starting to get a critical mass going, right? So those of you who have done it know that it's a peer accountability model. You have a partner, you meet every week, you set some goals, da-da-da. So I've been doing Cojourn for Racial Justice. If people wonder where I go on Wednesday nights, every Wednesday night for the last 3 years, and we basically took up reading about the history of the US around race. And so Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, highly recommend. One of the things we can do to move upriver is to know and learn our history, which is why it's so critical for education and educational institutions to have the freedom to teach it, right? We in the developed world are like homeowners who have inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable loam and rock, heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched, but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades. We are the heirs to whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with now, right? Ignorance of what's wrong with your house is not going to save you from the house crumbling, right? Ignorance of the history of the house isn't going to save you, and of course, people in my family love to talk about joists and foundations and stuff like that. So know the history, that's an important piece. Dr. Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, has issued a public health advisory around loneliness, and I know this, I saw Anna Maria somewhere. I know the School of Public Health is really focusing on this as well, that loneliness is in fact a public health threat. And they talk about all of the ways that loneliness can impact us negatively, but in particular, Dr. Murthy, Surgeon General Murthy, talks about the information environment that we exist in. That engineered environment that constantly fuels this sense of not enough. And some of us have the privilege of growing up without it, right? But some of you have children where you see the impact of that not enough narrative constantly. It's broken, in some sense, our ability to dialogue. We see it in our students who don't want to make a phone call to schedule an appointment, that we have to reteach and practice in-person interaction for better or worse. It needs to be practiced. And that the growing isolation and loneliness, as I mentioned, impairs our physical health, our productivity, and increasing violence that comes from, and next slide, please, this engineered discontent. Social media, a great book to check out, The Chaos Machine, about the algorithms that are only feeding you a certain type of information, that are polarizing. You know, we live in an attention economy, And our basic wiring is such that we pay more attention when we feel there's a threat. So material on the internet that has that emotional valence, like you're in trouble, you're in danger, gets your attention more. So we shouldn't be surprised that that's the content we're swimming in. We spend more time than I would care to tell you about and that I would like to responding to what people are putting on TikTok and whatever else, because it's extreme. And I think the only counterbalance to that in some ways beyond regulation of this carcinogen would be to keep giving people community that is in person. So I highly recommend The Chaos Machine. All right, we're gonna watch a little video about the elements of belonging. This is Karen Taylor. She is the Chief Diversity Officer for a company called Workday.
Lastly, and this is the most important thing, and this is what my talk is all about, and that is, if you want people to thrive, create the conditions for belonging. These are the 5 tenets or conditions that I talked about. The first one is psychological safety. Psychological safety must be in place because that's what drives that sense of trust for us in the workplace or in the communities that we are in or at our church or at our synagogue or even on a team that we are on. That psychological safety, that place where I can actually share how I'm feeling regardless of how I'm feeling. The environment is such that people are going to welcome how I'm feeling, whether or not it's good or bad. They're willing to listen to the experiences that I have And they're willing to lean in to understanding those experiences as well. Psychological safety must be in place. The second thing is empathy. If we haven't learned anything over the last couple of years, it is that empathy and care and compassion needs to stand tall when we are leading other people and when we are engaging with other people. We've got to go back to that sense of care about one another. And in some cases, we've actually lost our place there. But empathy, that care, that compassion has to be in place for most of us as well. Acceptance is the next thing. We need to be accepted for our authentic selves. And I use our authentic selves and our authentic best selves for a reason. Not our authentic whole selves, because there is a thing about bringing our whole self to work, right? There are parts of me that should be kept in the closet that we actually don't want to come out. And when Karen wants to be mean, nasty Karen Taylor on a Monday, my colleagues shouldn't have to deal with that. That person gets to stay at home. But my authentic best self, that's the person that we want to show up every single day, because that's the person who's gonna help us thrive in the workplace as well. The next one is about connection. And connection is about a couple of things. It's about being connected to the people. It's about being connected to a bigger purpose. But for me, this connection was even more so about feeling wanted. People wanted me to be in that room. That is an important element of belonging for me, to feel that connection with other people regardless of how I am feeling that particular day. That need for connection in all of us is something that is prevalent when you are building a culture of belonging. And then lastly, the notion of feeling embraced. And some people think embraced, but think about this. Think about what it feels like when you get that big, warm embrace from someone that really loves you. You feel valued, you feel respected, you feel appreciated, and that's critical when it comes to belonging.
Okay, thank you.
So these things are really important for just about any.
There we go. Wow, it's great having tech people, isn't it? Awesome. Next slide, please. So safety, belonging is a bodily experience, and we are wired such that connection is protective, right? So if you're on the savannah, I don't know if that's where but we always use that example, right? And you're by yourself, the hypervigilance is important for your survival. If you're in a group, you might be able to take a shift and sleep while other people are taking care of the fire or the babies, right? And so we are wired for connection, and that helps us regulate. And a famous experiment that many of you know about, we won't show this video, is the still face experiment, actually conducted at UMass Boston by Edward Tronick. And that is that a baby and the mother are interacting and doing that dance that they do of communication, saying, I'm here and you're here and it's all good. And then they say to the mother, please don't respond to the infant. So the mother goes still face and the infant looks and is like, okay, what is going on here? And then fairly instantly you can imagine what happens. The infant starts screaming, freaking out, loses their posture, actually starts spitting up. Right? Anxiety is a bodily experience. That one of the number one, and Anne-Marie, you're going to correct me on this if I'm wrong here. I love putting people on the spot. One of the number one issues that people come to Students with Disabilities office is because of GI distress, right? Related to, I'm sure, a number of issues, but anxiety being one of them, right? And so it's a bodily experience. And then when the mother comes back, there's rapprochement, we call it, right? And we're back in connection, right? And so imagine what it's like to move through campus where people are headphone screened and not being faces with one another. And so next slide, please. In order for us to build this community and this web, we have to get people into that window of tolerance where we're in the optimal state, where we can access reason and emotion. And this, again, comes from the body. So we can be hyper-aroused and anxious, or some of you are aware of students and ourselves who feel at times very hypo-aroused, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe it's when it's time to get out of bed. But through connection and the body, we can move ourselves into this green zone. This is the work of Daniel Siegel, who also talks about interpersonal neurobiology, right? That this is an interactive process, but also that we can use the body, the breath, to calm down. We can use the body to move around and get energized, which is why work at places like campus recreation is so critical to the well-being, and at athletics, to the well-being of our students. So how do we do it? How do we move upriver? Dr. Resmaa Menakem, and thank you, Shelley Perdomo, for suggesting this book so many years ago, not that many actually, talks about doing your reps, right? That also our reactions and some of this unconscious bias work, right, around race are also at the bodily level that we need to tune into to have that sequence of awareness, insight, choice. Is this how I want to react? How do I slow this down and tune in? And so I'm going to send you this link. He has a newsletter, a blog posty thing that's really worth looking into, Unlocking the Genius of Your Body. And the first exercise in that is, go about your day, go to the door, and for 10 times, I want you to open the door for somebody, let them walk in, like stand at the student union door. And then as soon as they walk in, make your niceties, and then take your journal and jot down, what did I feel, what did I think, da-da-da. Do that 20 times. Do that 30 times. Do that 40 times. Look at your journal. What do you see? What do you notice? Resmaa Menakem refers to this as somatic abolition, and importantly, just as important for white bodies as bodies of culture. What are you aware of? So trust is built. Shout out to Dave Neely, Cheryl, and the work that they're doing. We can build trust by providing experiences for people to sit and interpersonally, neurobiologically, and otherwise connect with one another and talk about these issues. The People's Supper is one example of that. Luckily, we are having another one of these on Monday, October 16th from 6 to 7:30 at the campus center. A chance to sit down and talk. Social change moves at the speed of relationships, and relationships move at the speed of trust. Importantly, I need to make a note about lunch. I have been told that lunch will be served at 12:30, so if you are sitting there now thinking like, it's 12:04, why is she still talking? I won't go till 12:30. Loretta Ross also highlights the importance of connection, that we have to think about creating a calling in culture, right? We're imperfect, we're not gonna get it right. We have to engage in the dialogue instead of just shutting people out and saying, you're bad, you're wrong, we don't wanna talk to you anymore, right? So luckily, I'm sure there's a logic behind 3 o'clock, faculty and staff opportunity, another opportunity for students, and a reception in between. Do not miss Loretta Ross. Kurt Lewin, so here's another book recommendation, Jeff Cohen's book on belonging. Kurt Lewin talks about this idea in social psychology that we can engage in situation crafting. So famous experiment, I don't know, I think it was in the 70s, called the Robbers Cave experiment. All the psych people, social psych people know what this is, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of the Robbers Cave experiment, right? So you have two groups of campers, and they're in different cabins, and they're like the rattlesnakes and the bobcats or whatever they are, and they're gonna compete against each other, and they're gonna ransack each other's cabins, and they're gonna hate the other group until the food truck gets stuck in the ditch. And the only way they're getting the food truck out of the ditch is to collaborate, cooperate, and tie a rope, and everybody pulls, right? And all of a sudden, they're starting to bond, and they're starting to say, hey, not so-and-so, not so bad, right? So how do we craft environments that have a superordinate goal and support cooperation, despite the fact that we live in this system where everybody gets this transcript that says an individual grade on it, right? But Claire, your work and others, thinking about collaborative classrooms, jigsaw classrooms, et cetera, how do we do this in a participatory fashion? And there are periods, right, sensitive periods where people might be more open to these suggestions about being collaborative and to create belonging, and when people are new to an environment, right? We're open when we feel doubt about belonging to being brought into the fold. And so the good work that we do at orientation right? New student orientation, which is this first 40 days, is still happening, is a great time to teach people about belonging and welcoming them in. We should be using affirmation. So, I recommend Jeff Cohen's book. Point taken. So we designed for cooperation. On the left, yes, left is a picture of the weight room at Campus Recreation. Now we call it Recwell. So there's nothing, I'm not making a criticism of what happens there. Weightlifting is important and good, resistance training makes your bones nice and solid. But in terms of sense of belonging and the kinds of things I just described from Kurt Lewin, this picture makes me feel some sort of way. I was up there yesterday checking out the hole in the ceiling. It made me feel some sort of way. And there may be quiet time that people want to themselves, but it doesn't appear to be a place of interaction, of joy, of connection. Although, it's really interesting to go up there and watch. I won't go into a whole expose. There's maybe some gender differences here, too. Versus the kind of work that we see UMPD doing out on the ropes course with students, where they need to cooperate and collaborate, and how do they feel after that time together? And so programs like Outward Bound are doing work around race and social justice through these experiential cooperative experiences. And in particular, the outdoor adventure education is consequential. We need to cooperate or we're not getting the truck out of the ditch. So how do we set up environments for students? Last spring, we piloted the Safety, Dignity, and Belonging Retreat and Liberatory Practice. Dr. Kofi Charu Nat Turner from the School of Education, Kavitha Rao, who is someone I was, reading Emergent Strategy, which some of you are familiar with, that very famous book, and there's Kavitha quoted. I'm like, oh, cool. We got the A team here, and Jonathan Crowley, who's here somewhere today, along with myself, led students at the Mount Ida campus for 4 days in a retreat based on the work of Resmaa Menakem. How do we calm the nervous system in order to connect and speak explicitly about interracial connections? Again, we build and create these opportunities for belonging. We used yoga, meditation, crafts, plenty of great food from UMass Dining, storytelling, and importantly, we created it as a digital detox. We offered to hold their phones for them for 4 days, and shockingly, everyone did it. So I had an envelope full of phones buzzing in the top drawer of my bureau all weekend. We gave the parents or whoever they wanted their emergency contact our cell phone numbers. And really by night number 2 or 3, what we saw, I thought, was fairly incredible. Play. Students were playing hide and seek among the, if any you've been to Mount Ida, it's like a pretty good hide and seek place, right? Hide and seek, acro yoga, playing. They were playing and talking to one another. We can build the environment for connection. Other programs that we've offered, we mentioned Cojourn already. I highly recommend you check it out. We have done Project Connect, which was originally out of Amherst College, circles of folks talking to one another, mostly during the pandemic, trying to provide an opportunity for students. And then Narrative 4 that's talking about an empathy revolution. What can we do to tell stories with one another? So I tell my story to my partner tells their story to me, and then I tell my partner's story in the first person. So my name is Iris. I had this experience one time. I have to embody that story differently to pay it respect, to tell it, and it's different to hear your story told. What we're trying to do is weave the threads of empathy. Remember, right? Empathy being a core component of belonging. And then our good friends in Residential Life, Jean and crew, who are here with us, have an entire curriculum in the residence halls, which there are a lot of people living over there, especially a lot this year, right? In the lounges, et cetera. The ed priority there is a result of living in residence halls. Students will continue positive social changes in their community. And those relationships sit at the center. So those are explicit conversations, bulletin boards, talking about getting along in the room, talking about getting along across difference. It is intentional, it is explicit, and it's happening across this campus. Good work by Gloria DeFulvio in the School of Public Health of cross-generational storytelling, and so I encourage you to check out storyshareumass.org. Time for you to talk to each other one last time, and then we will quickly, I don't know if we'll quickly wrap it up, one last section. So seriously, 3 minutes. 3 minutes, where do you feel a sense of belonging at UMass? Turn and talk. And maybe why? Maybe why. Hi, how are you? Good. If not, you can catch me after.
Yes, absolutely. Very much.
Thank you. Okay. Excellent. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the folks who will be providing food and the gorgeous flowers. Aren't they beautiful? Love the flowers. I would love a way to capture all of that, where you feel like you belong at UMass. Someday when we're more sophisticated, we'll do that. I didn't think that far ahead. I want to do a last piece here about, if we can go ahead, talk a little bit, or at least give mention to the Okanagan Charter. So keep going, keep going. Yay, we signed the Okanagan Charter. Next slide. And slide after that, yeah, this is what always happens in my presentations. Next slide. We're gonna start skipping stuff. Yay, Okanagan. So the Okanagan Collective that's geared towards well-being, we keep saying, what are we calling this thing, Di? The Okanagan Well-Being Collective, because it is a collective. We don't know what it's gonna look like yet. We've made a pledge. Ann Becker is chairing this effort with myself and lots of other great people. We have 4 different working groups that are about to begin. Diversity and equity, health and wellness, sustainability, and the built environment. And next slide, please. I think what's important about this is we're going to figure out how to do collaborative leadership. How do we become a health promoting university, and how do we do collaborative leadership, both equally complex. And this idea that we're going to start out with, and many people have much more expertise than I do in this, and my plan is to educate myself more about design-centered thinking, this idea from the first slide that good design is human-centered, right? And so I encourage you to maybe take a chance to look at this video from, we're not going to play it, from an organization called Embrace that had the human-centered problem of the need for infants to be in incubators. But here we have the Ukraine, here we have people very far away from city centers where they cannot get to the incubators. So what good are they doing? And so they designed from the point of view of the desperate mother who needs care for an infant, right? That's where the conversation needs to start, the point of view of the user. And so they design these sort of sleeping bag looking battery-powered things to keep infants alive, right? And that's sort of the gravity and opportunity that we have, is to start with, importantly, if you can go to the next slide, conversations with the community. And so our first mini project was last spring in a community engagement process called Photo Voice, where we met regularly with a small group of individuals. Mira Weil and Di Fedorchik led this effort. Narrative and visual storytelling. This is going to take time, right? It's going to take time. And so there are pictured students who told the story and shared photos around their experience of recovery at UMass and how much the community was an essential element for them to be well, right? And so we're looking for a place to hang those pictures. We've been talking a lot about design, thinking about residence halls, thinking about campus recreation and other places and spaces. Ultimately, how do we design the campus for connection? And not just to each other, but to nature, the natural world, and all of those curative elements. How would it look differently? The excitement of our imagination to build, back to that piece that is sort of elemental for me in my ancestry, is like, how do we craft this thing, right? What would it look like to create residential neighborhoods where students have a built environment that encourages their gathering, to play, to rest, to study, and to create spaces that feel like home? I'm always making this obvious point, but students live here. They do, right? And the spaces are gorgeous, right? The space here is lovely, but it doesn't feel like your home. But we get to go home, many of us, and students are here. So where's the living room for them, right? Where's the kitchen for them? I mean, we have beautiful food all the time, right? So just be thinking outside. The conversation I had yesterday with Richard Yeager was, whose voices are involved in this visioning process? And I don't think I've seen yet what I think it should or could look like, but that's only my perspective. So we're designing for belonging, and a shout out to Residential Life and student activists who have gotten a variance passed or legislation so that we don't have to go get a special variance to make a bathroom gender inclusive, right? We can make that choice, designate bathroom. And so Mindy Dom and Joe Comerford have said, you all were our inspiration. Your activism pushed this forward. So shout out to UMass. Yay. So the final few thoughts here. Dan Siegel, who I mentioned earlier about interpersonal biology, talks about being interconnected. Adrienne Marie Brown talks about emergent strategies, that we move from nature, we are of nature, and we are all connected. Suzanne Simard talks about finding the mother tree. Trees are not separate, they're communicating with one another. What brilliant research in the sciences. This from Adrienne Marie Brown. Everything is connected. The soil needs rain, organic matter, air, worms, and life in order to do what it needs to do to give and receive life. Each element is an essential component. Organizing takes humility and selflessness and patience and rhythm, while our ultimate goal of liberation will take many expert components. Some of us build and fight for land, healthy bodies, healthy relationships, clean air, water, home, safety, dignity, and humanizing education. Others of us fight for food and political prisoners and abolition and environmental justice. Our work is intersectional and multifaceted. Nature teaches us that our work has to be nuanced and steadfast. And more than anything, that we need each other at our highest natural glory in order to be free. Next slide, please. We had the privilege as part of the U.S. Health Promoting Campus Network to visit Bryan Stevenson's museum this past spring. He talks about 4 directives. Get proximate. Change is impossible when we're working at a distance. Change the narrative. What are the scripts that we've been told about race and difference in our head? Learn to be uncomfortable and stay hopeful. So this is a picture of Bree Newsome climbing the pole in South Carolina's Capitol to take down the Confederate flag. She gave an interview at Yale and New Haven, and this is a little bit 2 paragraphs long, but stick with me in this story. Once we settled the first matter of who could scale the pole, which was largely a matter of who could physically do it and who could risk being arrested, we as a collective thought more about what we wanted to communicate visually and symbolically with this action, Newsome said. We would be attacking a symbol of white supremacy with an action that symbolized its dismantling. The activists knew that Newsome and anyone with her that day would likely be arrested. Someone who could withstand an arrest needed to be with her. A fellow activist named James Tyson volunteered to accompany her that day as she scaled the 4-foot-tall spoked fence that surrounded the flagpole. He helped her get over the fence and stood guard, waiting for police. As I neared the top of the pole and prepared to remove the flag, the officers on the ground trained their tasers on me and threatened to shoot me with bolts of electric currents, she said. Given that I was attached to a metal pole, they could have potentially electrocuted me. Tyson would grab the pole that day, telling officers if they were going to electrocute Newsome, they had to electrocute him too. He also would be arrested with her after their mission had been accomplished. Tyson is white. It's become common to hear social justice advocates say that they don't need white allies, they need white accomplices, she said. An accomplice is what James was that day. History will rightly remember him alongside the many white accomplices over the centuries who have risked their own safety and in some cases spilled their own blood in defense of Black life in the name of freedom. Not to be compared in any way, but we all need to hold the pole. Finally, 2 last points. There's a special obligation of the university, I think, around belonging as ChatGPT and artificial intelligence emerge, the exchange of information, this is not the only place to get information. But we are the place that specializes in the IRL experience, right? The in real life experience where we can teach people about belonging, tolerance, and creating a better world. The special obligation of the university is to provide that real life experience. So this book, What Makes Us Human, they fed all the major religious texts of the world into ChatGPT and then asked it questions. What should we all be taught? Goodness, patience, kindness, tolerance, humility, to serve, compassion, to sing with all the voices of the world, to heal, and to know that I am the universe. My final story is about a student that came on retreat with us, Sam Tran. We love Sam Tran. You might see him playing the piano in the student union. So next slide, please. Sam was walking around at the retreat with a journal and was like, Sam, what's up with the journal? Sam walks around campus with this journal and asks people to write in the journal, and it has a prompt. And the prompt really kind of surprised me and touched me. His prompt is, what is love and who deserves it? And people have some powerful things to say. Love is an act of freedom and liberation and is deserved by anyone by as much as they can hold. That was another one of our retreat participants. So I'm very, very grateful to be able to have spoken with you all today, for you to have spoken with one another. I please welcome feedback so that I can continue to grow and expand my thinking that we together can do this important work, because for me, this is a work of love. That's the only thing that's going to win the day here. And so I have faith and hope in that. Just like Brian Stevenson says in his last point, you have to have hope. Much, much gratitude to all of you, and thank you for being my colleagues.
I'm like pushing all of the claps to Betsy. I'm standing here, but these are for Betsy. Thank you so much. Thank you, Betsy, for an enlightening talk. I always learn so much from you, generally speaking, but particularly when you give these talks. The way that you connect the bodily experience to the DEI work, and also provide the context for us to understand, to bring our full human selves to this work, and the importance of that is just so helpful. So thank you again for that. At this point, I'm not going to stand between you all and lunch. Lunch is prepared and ready. Please enjoy the lunch. We will take about a half-hour break to grab lunch before our fireside chat with our Chancellor, Javier Reyes, who is here now. So thank you for being here, Chancellor. I encourage you during lunch to interact with our Immigrant Voices display. As you can see over there behind the food trays we have displayed for you. It's provided by Jacob Carter and the Partnership for Worker Education Program. Fantastic work that is done there. Please, please, please take a look at it as you're preparing your meals for lunch. So again, enjoy each other, enjoy this time, and we'll come back here about 5 till 1 to begin our fireside chat. Thank you all. Oh, one last thing quickly. If you need some space, because we're quite full in here, the Cape Cod Lounge, which is just catty corner to where we are now, is available for you to take plates and eat there as well. Thank you. So lots of folks are still eating, and I don't like to get between people and food. So we're going to give you another 5 minutes, and then we'll begin. Yes. it looks like most people have finished their lunch. If you haven't, please continue to enjoy the lunch. If you want seconds, thirds, there's no judging, please. The food has to get eaten, so please enjoy it. So welcome back. This is a session that I'm very excited about. I'm excited about all of them, but particularly excited about this one, an opportunity to have an intimate conversation with our chancellor. As this session states, we have the opportunity to sit in conversation with the 12th chancellor for our campus. Please allow me to introduce you to Chancellor Javier Reyes. He's coming. Chancellor Reyes is an economist by training. He was born and raised in Mexico and is the first Hispanic person to lead the campus. As an ardent advocate for public higher education, he is committed to advancing the transformative power of the university through inclusivity, engagement, and entrepreneurial excellence. Prior to leading UMass Amherst, Chancellor Reyes held senior leadership positions at the University of Illinois Chicago, West Virginia University, and the University of Arkansas. Welcome, Chancellor. Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So to begin, I just want to start by allowing folks an opportunity to get to know a little bit about you, our community. Certainly, we've seen you all around campus doing everything from, I think, shooting water hoses out of like the student fire team to, hanging out with our football team. But we really want to know a little bit about your journey here. In particular, what has your road to UMass looked like, and how have you found spaces of belonging along the way?
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, for being here today, taking so much time of what I know it's a busy schedule for all of us at this time of the year. But this is important, and this is something that matters. So I went around the tables and just making sure that you understand this is the first time I see this event. And you just don't know what it's going to look like, how it's going to feel, and it looks incredible, it feels amazing, and you can see that there is definitely something special happening at UMass, which I think has something to do with the question that you were asking me, Nev, of what has been my journey in the finding places of belonging. And I have to say that in the universities where I've been, I did find that sense of, or place of belonging in different spaces. Especially, I'll go back first being in Mexico. When as you know, I'm originally from Mexico. I was working while studying, and I even got a sense of belonging at that time, being an undergrad student in the Mexican Stock Exchange building, feeling completely out of place until someone took the time to say, hey, let's go have lunch, and took an interest after I was being an intern there and ended having a full-time job. But I owe it to that person that say, hey, let's have lunch. And then me being able to say, you're paying, right? Because I can't pay. So it was nice. But I found then when I went to Texas A&M, a similar type of effort is it took me a little bit of time to understand that people will take an interest in you, and sometimes will reach out to you when you are also a little bit of making yourself available. But it's hard for people. And A&M was a big university. I didn't feel that as an international student, I could walk into a space and feel, have that sense of belonging. But the International Program Office there did a lot of events that I realized how important they were, which is why when I came here and the other universities where I've been, I immediately connect with the International Program Office because I know their events did make a difference in me. So I found my belonging there, and that was at A&M. When I went to Arkansas, it was a similar thing. It was great. The college business was doing great, and they were very friendly. There were only 2 Latinos in the whole college, and they were very nice to us. And we connected with people across the campus, with the other 3 or 4 that were at the time. And then we realized that there was a city called Springdale, 5 miles up the road, where I actually had my house. And there were a lot of Hispanics in that area that they didn't think that the university was a place for them. So how to connect with them? We were able to connect with the teachers there, start a connection, and that's how I found myself, my place of belonging in Arkansas was not at the university, but was with the community. So what I'm trying to tell you is WVU was the same thing. It was trying to be intentional, not only on my part, but sometimes when it wasn't there, like at Arkansas, where can I go to find it? And how was Springdale visible to me? I was living there, but I knew it was a Hispanic community. So when I came to Arkansas to find a place or a house, somebody told me, if you're looking for a Hispanic space, here's where it is. So in a way, it was the university telling me, we know we don't have it internally, but we know the community has it. And now, after a few years working, that Springdale community feels welcome in the university. So how have I found places of belonging has been sometimes someone reaching out, making you feel comfortable in an uncomfortable place. Sometimes just it's natural, there's a structure in place like the International Programs Office that helps you and you navigate to it. Or someone realizes you don't have it, but we're working on it and here's where you can go. So that's how I found my place of belonging.
Thank you, Chancellor. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the work that the International Programs Office on our campus does, that Student Affairs and Campus Life, like all of these different units across campus working together to create that sense of belonging and really draw students in. So thank you for sharing that. Our Belonging at UMass initiative is a direct result of our campus climate survey data. We know that true belonging is a work of outcome. It's the outcome of justice work, equity work, inclusion work. What is something that excites you about leading this work with us at UMass?
Well, days like today, right? And again, you don't have to go far. People will always, I will always use this example, and it can be understood in many different ways, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. When I came for the search process, for the visit, they took us to, we had dinner with some of the board members, and Ken Toon and Chef Alex and Chef Anthony were there. And they were there to tell us, because, this university, as we should all be, we're very proud of our dining facilities and our dining experience. That is not only the food, but it's the experience that it offers that makes it number one. So they were there to say, hey, these are the ones who are making this happen, because very few universities have figured it out. But I asked one question to the three of them. I said, what is the goal? What is the mission for you? And the answer was very simple, but very, very deep. And what Ken said is, what we want to do is give our students, our faculty and staff, the best cultural experience, the best diverse cultural experience through food. And you can see that's what we have. But when your dining team, which is leading an incredible partners, speaks like that and articulates it in such an impromptu, to me it spoke to what this university is doing and is ready to do, and continues to be a university that can shape higher ed and not be shaped by higher ed. So that's what I would say. That.
Thank you.
It excites me, just the incredible work that has been done. But it's not stopping. It continues. It's what's our next.
Thank you for that. And when we think about the equity work that we do, certainly it's each individual contributes to it, right? But it's also a collective of units, whether it's administration, whether it's our student groups that's advancing equity on our campus. As new chancellor, how do you envision this work continuing to advance under your leadership? What are some, yeah.
I would say, as you have seen, I'm spending a lot of time walking the campus. Some of you have been I don't know if beneficiaries or we're still wondering what else to call it, of my impromptu, all of a sudden I'm walking across the campus and I'm just going to go into this building. I'm going to walk into that office, I'm going to say hello. And I walk in and I say hello, and people look at me like, so, I'm just saying hello. I just wanted to know I'm walking the campus, and I have no agenda, but it's just getting to know it. So it's me learning, listening, seeing, touching, feeling, understanding our campus, right? Everyone, from meeting with our grounds and construction team, meeting with the police, meeting with the faculty, meeting with the students, meeting with the dining, meeting with the janitorial staff. It's how I learn. So when you ask me the question of how do we continue to lead, I'm going to be asking that question from all of you. I'm going to ask the question is, what do you think we should be doing? Now, sometimes the answer is very simple. You say, well, we're in the great trajectory, we're going to continue. My question is, a trajectory is nothing unless you know what's your next step. What's your stretch point, right? Because you cannot just be in a trajectory while standing still and doing the same thing. You have to know what is your next point, what's going to be our stretch. And that's what I'm going to be asking you. Walking into this room, seeing all of you, it's an incredible jolt of energy that I felt. Now, I think it would be a mistake if I tell you, well, here's what we're going to do now. Instead of asking you, well, you've done an amazing amount of work and efforts and leadership that you have in each of your units. What should we do next? And hearing all the answers that come in and have a team that puts that together. But it's not what I want to do. It's what the campus wants to do. I think that my role is to mostly, at the moment, is ask that question of what's next in all our dimensions, including in the ones that we're leading, like inequity, diversity, and inclusion.
Thank you for that. And this next question, so this is as controversial as it's going to get, so everyone can, this is the moment. You're from Texas A&M, right? You went to school there.
Yes.
They have some very interesting things happening in the space of DEI and the ways that they're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a university, but also as a state. And there are other states across the country and other universities that are taking similar steps and moving in similar directions. This is a tension, right? This is a tension between how we might think about this work here at UMass Amherst or in the state of Massachusetts versus other places. Where do you see the future of higher ed going, considering this tension that's taking place between various universities and ideologies?
I think the future of higher ed, I would say it's nebulous a little bit, right? Because we keep generalizing higher ed as if higher ed in Texas or Florida is the same as higher ed in Massachusetts or Illinois or West Virginia. So it's different. They're different systems, different beliefs, different what people think is right or wrong. I think we're in the right. They may have other thoughts. So to me, I want to decouple it from what is the future of higher ed, which is there's too much noise. There's too many people pulling so many directions, versus what is the future of higher ed that we want to shape and be a player in. And I think the future of higher ed where we want to be as a university, being from Massachusetts, being a champion for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, is one in which we need to define what does that mean for our campus. Today, not mentioning names and meetings specifically, I sat in a few meetings where people are asking me, well, if somebody like so-and-so comes to campus and speak, what would you do? If somebody wants to do this, or a student organization wants to bring the speaker, you should not allow that, or you should not do this. And I've been saying, I think the future of higher ed that this university has portrayed is one in which all voices are heard when you have civil discourse, when you are not causing, you're not inciting to harm, you're not inciting to violence, and we're not going to yell at each other. Where we are an institution of education. We're a place where good ideas and bad ideas should be debated under the auspices of we don't yell, we don't throw things, we don't go and interrupt other people when they're speaking. You want to talk. But if people don't want to hear you, that's fine. People can go to other venues and hear what they want to hear. But that's, to me, it's going to be a very tricky balance. And I'm going to be asking all of you, what does that mean? What exactly does that mean? Because these next few months, as you will portray it, are going to be a challenge. I am thrilled of have such an incredible team in the DEI office that has an experience. And most important, in my opinion, again, from what I heard walking the halls, has the trust of the campus to provide guidance, to provide ways to make sure that every voice is heard, but what is the context, what is the platform, how do we do it properly, that can work with our public relations, government relations, that can work with alumni relations, because we hear from everyone. It's not only from our students, not only from our staff. We hear from alumni, we hear from legislators, we hear from foundations, we hear from interest groups outside. So I'm very confident that we have a leadership team that can help us navigate those points in time in which the questions are asked. But we want to make sure that all ideas are presented and all voices are heard, as long as there's no intention to harm, there's no inciting to violence, there's no yelling, there's no pushing, there's no shoving. There's just academic realm here, where we're sitting in rooms like this, debating, and having an intelligent conversation about perhaps controversial and sometimes scary and I would say topics that create and can create a lot of anxiety. And I think we have a mature enough team to help us manage that.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that compliment as well. I won't own it, because the way that I think about, and I've shared this with you before, the way that we think about in our office and really on campus the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that it's shared. Betsy earlier talked about the collaborative leadership model, and that's the way we think about our work. We own this work just as much as our friends over in Student Affairs and Campus Life do, just as much as the deans and the directors. And so this is the work so the work that you see us do is really a reflection of our entire campus community that's dedicated to this work.
If you let me add, why is that so important? Because if we really want to shape we really have to participate in the conversations, right? But we cannot participate in a yelling match. That's not shaping, that's just fueling a controversy,
So when we think about our work, we are really trying to address all populations: faculty, students, staff, random folks from the town of Amherst walking on our campus. If they feel like there's something that happened to them or is happening to them where they don't feel included, then we want to hear about that and we want to try to do something to make their experience better. As you've been walking around our campus, we've had conversations about particular groups that you've seen that you want to spend some time with. And particular populations. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe one or two priorities that you have when you think about DEI?
Well, I think one, of course, is trying to look what is the diversity when it comes to the composition of our student body, our faculty and our staff, right? The sort of sometimes the basics, what we should look like, and do we have individuals and the proportions and the individuals that represent those communities from the outside that we want to see here? Are we underrepresented, overrepresented, and all in different aspects? So I do think we have some work to do when it comes to underrepresented minorities to make sure that we're working more with the gateway communities and gateway cities and gateway towns that we have in Massachusetts. And I want to, that's an area that I want to focus a little bit more when it comes to demographics. But that's working sometimes from the outside to the inside. There's also work to do from the inside. I've been walking the campus as well, and some of the deans that might be here, Andy is here, and he hears me talk about it all the time. I walk into a building, and the first thing that I'll ask, something that can be very controversial because it's the resources needed are hard to get and be able to have them in the amounts we need them, but is this ADA accessible? It's not, okay, well, what's the plan? Well, I want to have a plan for every building. We may not afford everything, but what's the next for this building? If we had it, do we understand the problem such that it's just a money problem? That's different than we just don't know. So that's something I want to start looking when it comes to accessibility. Okay, we may not afford everything. We're a public institution. But do we understand the problem to the moment that if someone, a foundation, an alum, a fundraiser could emerge that says, we're going to make that happen, you know how much it costs, and you can make it happen. So I want us really to address when it comes to accessibility and think of our campus that way. The other area that I think we want to talk about is there's a lot of, and you heard me talk about it, I think that we need to bring more of our community into the university, more of our university to the community. They need to understand us better. So that's another area that, in my opinion, diversity, equity, and inclusion includes our community around us and makes us a good partner with that community. And those are areas that I want to focus. I know that when it comes to our faculty and our students, we need to do more. Well, with the faculty, we need to go and recruit, retain those faculty members. And I know the provost has programs that have been developed. I want to study them, analyze them, and see what's next for those programs. When it comes to our students, if we want to be a university that continues to push economic mobility, social mobility, well, more of the first-generation students, more of the Pell-eligible students should find their home here, should be able to come here. And I think they will, but it does also take up an investment from the university that, again, we may not be able to afford everything we want to do, but can we at least understand what would we do? Because if it's a money problem, then we can really, that's where you prioritize, or that's when you get the development team, or you get the government advocacy team out there and communicating with people that can get us more resources to do it. So,
Thank you. So at this point, we asked you all who registered to submit questions online for the Chancellor, and we have a few of those that we've handpicked that we'll ask the Chancellor now. So what has been the most surprising about the DEI climate at UMass Amherst since your arrival?
I think
Only good stuff.
Yes, of
by the
course,
way.
of course.
So,
There hasn't been any
preface
negative
that.
stuff.
Yeah, of course, of course.
I mean, again, it's events like this one. And the other thing that was surprising, there's a student here, where is her, Ranika? And then since I meet a lot of students, I do take notes of their names. What was this student? Oh, it's the other phone. Sorry. It's in this one. Let's see. Where is that?
This is great. The Chancellor also doesn't have a pen, only digital.
Yes. It's important to have, there we go. Her name, her last name was Merchant. It was Ranika Merchant, and I think she might still be here. There she is. One of the surprises I have is she's a freshman. She heard us talk about it at convocation, that we wanted to have more students attend the JEDI conference. And she's here, and one of the questions that she has, she wanted to see more students here, right? So the surprise is to see her here participating, but then to also see that we have a lot of faculty and staff here, but we want to have more students. So, but the students are really ready and willing. And that, to me, that was a great surprise, right? To see a student, a freshman, just came to this university 2 weeks ago. She feels welcome to be in a room like this one. And that speaks volumes of this university. So.
And I love that observation as well, because that's something as a team putting this on now for the second time, we've recognized that whatever we're doing and designing, we're not reaching as many students as we would like to. So certainly pulling in our campus partners and SACL and others to really try to brainstorm, how do we create and design something that will speak to students? And maybe it's just gonna have to be a different event, right? Maybe this is a little too stuffy for our students, but we'll figure that out. And the second question that we have is, how has your previous experiences influenced the way that you approach DEI work? So a little similar from the first question that I asked you about your journey here.
I think I have to go back to comparing, not saying a specific case or anything, but my experience at Arkansas, then my experience in West Virginia. I think my experience at Arkansas was more of, there are issues when it comes to diversity in a campus, in that case where there were racial issues, that the university took just head on. They wanted to address them, and they just spoke about it, and it was mostly at that time with the DACA students. Mm-hmm. And how the chancellor stood up, made an event, threats on his life, didn't matter. He just continued with the event. Then going to West Virginia, a completely different event of circumstances there, in which instead of tackling the issue in an environment where you can talk about it and have a conversation, it led to postponing and not having transparency in some issues that backfire eventually. So I'm always more like, can we talk about it? Can we find a table where we can sit around and talk about this difficult issue that just has happened, or this situation that has happened? Can we first talk? I know that there are volatile environments and it's hard to come, but if we can't start by saying, We know that happened. We know it's awful. We can't accept that it has happened sometimes yet again. But we need to come back to that table and talk about it before we, instead of try to second guess or guess what the community would like us to do, or guess what our faculty or students are thinking. So when I was at UIC, I came in and I created that group, a group of faculty, students, and staff that I could talk to when things happen, right? I could reach out and say, hey, this has happened, and what are your thoughts? What do you do? What would we do? And it was sometimes a group that had to be very secretive to begin to, because there were some things that we can't talk about, the names and what's happening, right? But it was nice to have that one, a good sounding board where we could have a conversation and then reach out to our students, reach out to our faculty, reach out to our community, reach out to our legislators. But having that group that is representative of our communities that you can talk to is what I think it's an important aspect of any situation that we can get into.
Thank you. And you'll be very happy to know we have no shortage of students that want to have these discussions in the ways that you described, which is fantastic, right?
Yes.
Chancellor, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this very important topic, your insights, your experiences. I think this has been very great for folks. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you. There'll be many more moments like this. If folks can join me in thanking the Chancellor for this moment and a round of applause.
We have this.
Yes.
I'm happy to say one thing, that I'm about 8 weeks into the job, so there's a lot of things that I haven't gotten to. So I'll take a rain check a little bit on what. But the idea of shaping higher ed and not being shaped by higher ed, it belongs on looking at questions like the ones you're saying and having a conversation about it. But I don't know the details of what exactly and the level at which we're doing things. So let me get some more information, and we'll definitely look into it. But we always want to be a university. I think it was computer science who says it's computing for the improving. There we go. So being able to tackle on those principles are very important. So thank you. But we'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you.
All right, you all can't leave just yet. You have a few more words from me. So again, I just want to thank you all for showing up. Half of it, I was joking with someone a few minutes ago that half of the putting on something like this is having you all actually show up, right? And having the folks via live stream as well show up and be a part of this moment. So thank you for that. The 2023 JEDI Conference has come together through the dedication and engagement and collaboration of many partners, some of which I'll mention today and some of which I will undoubtedly forget to mention, and others who go totally unnoticed, but certainly help us put on this event. There are folks who served as speakers, workshop hosts, and organizers. Additionally, we want to thank the members of the JEDI Collaborative Team, the Campus DEI partners, folks in various units, whether it be, again, I mentioned Student Affairs so much because we work so closely with them, folks in HR, our schools and colleges, many of you out there who we work very closely with, OAPA, who I always have to shout out because without them, we would not have our climate survey and that data that informs so much of what we do. So thank you all. We also extend a special thank you to all of the behind-the-scenes work that went into bringing this event to fruition, with the support from conference services, facilities, and campus services, university relations, of course, always there by our side as well. So again, thank you as well to our partners interpreting for providing live captioning and workshop ASL interpreting, and Sonics for AV support and live streaming services. And of course, to Building Bridges for providing us with our Immigrant Voices exhibit, which again, if you haven't seen it, please walk over on your way out and take a look at the exhibit. It's fantastic. This marks the end of our keynote featured events for today. Certainly, we have other workshops and initiatives that are going on for the rest of the day today, as well as throughout this week and this month. So again, this is the big event that we put on as the Office of Equity and Inclusion, but there are smaller events happening in all the schools and colleges and various units across our campus for the next few weeks. So I encourage you to please engage with those. Again, thank you all for showing up today, for being a part of this conversation, and take good care.